Welcome back to the Rad City Design Studio. This week, I thought I'd take you behind the scenes while I make an earring collection. I gave a few of these away to family members and friends as Christmas gifts, and they were an absolute hit. The best part is you can mix and match the elements you already have on hand and create really stunning pieces in a very short amount of time. So let's jump right in. Everything I used in this video will be in the description below. If you have any questions, please comment and I will definitely answer. I started off with about 6 inches of 16 gauge aluminum craft wire. You can use any wire for this, or you could even use some metal connectors or jump rings. Again, whatever you have on hand. I like this wire because it's thick, but it's also super pliable, so it doesn't take a whole lot of strength to work with. I have terrible wrist issues, so this is a lot easier on me. I wrapped the wire around a nail tool, but you could really use anything, a pen, a pencil, whatever you have. The wider the diameter, the bigger your focal bead is going to be. I used my flush cutters to cut each ring from the coil until I had several little rings. Now you can make as many of these as you'd like. When batch making elements like this for a design, I try to make a good lot of them so I don't have to repeat the steps over and over. I wanted the end of each ring to press together very smoothly, so I used my rotary tool with a sanding wheel to grind down the ends, giving me a super clean edge. You could do this with a nail file or sandpaper, but this tool makes for a very short step. This isn't strictly necessary, but I like everything to look very clean and polished, so that's why I'm doing this. Once I was satisfied, I laid each ring out in a line on some cellophane tape. Now this is just plain old Scotch tape or cello tape if you're in the UK, and I mostly just used this to keep the rings from moving around as I work with my resin. I put a drop or two of resin into each ring. I didn't want to completely fill the resin or create a dome or anything like that. I just wanted enough to make a base. I used a dotting tool to make sure the resin fully touched the entire perimeter of the edge. Sometimes the resin may try to pull away from the ring, and if you catch it in time, you can just put another drop or two of resin in there. If not, that's okay because we're going to be adding a lot more layers of resin as we go, and you won't really see this base layer. I gave all of the rings a cure for about 1 minute. This next part is totally optional because you don't really see it in the end, but I used some silver chrome nail powder, using my finger to smooth it onto the resin in each ring. I like to do this because it makes the colors a bit more vibrant, and also I'm using one type of glitter on one side and another type on the other side, and I didn't want to be able to see the glitter through the bead from the other side, if that makes sense. I wiped away any excess chrome powder using a soft makeup brush that has since turned into a crafting brush. Then I put a dollop of resin on my silicone pad. I dipped the silicone side of my dotting tool into the resin, then gave each ring a little glaze. I'm mostly doing this to make sure my glitter sticks properly. Again, if the resin wants to pull toward the center or leaves any space uncovered, don't worry. You can either add a little bit more or you can wait to the next step when we're going to correct that. I started with my first glitter type and I love this glitter. It's one of my favorite glitters that I own. I sprinkled some over the first 4 rings using a tiny measuring spoon, but that's totally unnecessary. Then I used my dotting tool to push the glitter around until the coverage was nice and even. Now, when I did this, I kind of dumped my glitter on, which was maybe a little ambitious. And it really made it kind of clump up a bit. So I definitely recommend going slow and building your coverage up. Put a couple of drops of resin on top of that glitter to hold it in place. For the next 2, I used some iridescent cellophane flakes, and then I sprinkled it on and then smoothed it out using my dotting tool. I had to pull the flakes toward the center so that they wouldn't overlap the metal ring. Now there isn't anything wrong with it overlapping the ring. I just didn't want that specific look, but your mileage may vary. Next, I covered the last 4 with some bright blue mylar flakes. These 4 are going to be used to make Buffalo Bills earrings. Go Bills! but obviously you can use whatever you have, however you want these to look. Now, I forgot to film this, but I did add a few drops of resin on top of the glitter just like before, and then I cured them for 1 minute to make sure that that resin set. I dropped a little bit more resin onto each ring using my doming technique, which you can see in last week's video. There will be a link up here at the top. Then I used my dotting tool to spread everything evenly, and then dropped one more drop on the very tip top to build up that dome. During my first initial pour, when I was building the first layer, I did have some spillage on a few of the rings. This is totally normal, happens to the best of us. The excess resin was pretty thin, so I was able to just snap most of it off. And then for the rest of it, I used a hobby knife. This one is amazing, it's from Ryobi, to carefully carve off any excess. Please use extreme caution when you're doing this type of work. Please, please, please. Don't worry if you get some wonky edges or if it's no longer shiny. We're gonna hide that with a few more resin layers. Once I was happy that my edges were tidy, I laid every ring on another piece of cellophane tape face down so that I could work on the other side. If you wanted to make these as post earrings, you could add the post now, then cover with more resin and glitter. But I'm making these as dangle earrings, so I wanted both sides to look. I took the 4 beads with the solid blue mylar flakes and added a glaze of resin to make my glitter stick. Then I covered with a bright red fine glitter. I went ahead and cured this, but I knew that this layer wasn't going to completely cure solidly because that glitter is pretty opaque and I laid it on pretty thick. So once I was satisfied that nothing was going to drip off, I just went ahead, added another layer of resin on top, and again, slowly built up my dome. I did the exact same thing with the other rings, giving the back sides another layer of glitter, building up the dome, and then letting it cure really well. Then I let them completely cool down before I handled them. Next, I wanted to drill out the middle to create like a donut shape. I tried a few different methods for this to try and determine the fastest, safest way to do this so that you would have options. First, I used this little mini table saw. I actually really love this thing and you'll see a full review of it soon, but it did not work as neatly as I wanted it to work for this particular project. These rings are just a little too small. I tried to use my Dremel with like an actual drill bit. This was totally overkill and just made the whole process really awkward. I do not recommend going this route. Finally, I determined that the easiest, fastest way to do this was to hold the ring between my fingers, then press directly into the center using a round diamond drill bit. I would not call this the safest method, but it was definitely the fastest. I'm thinking about getting a little drill press attachment for my Dremel to make this a bit safer, but please use these methods at your own risk. Next, I took 3 pairs of these beads to build up my first batch of earrings. I'm really into dangling earrings right now, and my favorite thing is mixing different types of metal or different types of materials. So for the first 2, I trimmed some gunmetal colored chain to about 1.5 inches or so. My favorite way to do this is to trim the first piece to the length that I think I'm going to use. Then I hang that onto something like a wire, or in this case, a broken bezel. And then I thread on my longer piece of wire, and then just where they are the same length, I just trim right off, like I'm trimming my bangs or something. But yeah, whatever method works best for you. Some people count the links. I find that to be just tedious and boring. So this is the method I go with. Once I had the chain, I threaded it through the center of my resin beads. I tried a few different combinations of chain and jump rings until I was happy with the size and the balance of the earrings, and I used this same process with some lighter colored chain as well. This is an excellent project to use up those little scraps that you trimmed off of other projects. I love finding ways to repurpose what otherwise would have gone to waste. For the first pair, using the gunmetal findings, I decided that I was just going to hook the chain directly onto the earring hook, and then I used that large jump ring that I had set out earlier and threaded that through the bottom of the bead. I had some gorgeous iridescent glass moon beads that I ordered in bulk from Amazon, and I hooked that onto the jump ring as well. For the last element for this pair, I had some iridescent star beads that I strung onto an eye pin, then used my round nose pliers to create a loop at the top and fed that onto the jump ring before closing it. To do this, I fed the wire through the bead, then right at the top of the bead, I bent the wire at a 90-degree angle, or as close as I could get to it, and then I used my round nose pliers to curl the wire in the opposite direction of the bend. Where the wire overlapped itself, I used my flush cutters to trim off the excess, and that created a little loop. To finish the earring, I threaded the loop of the earring hook through the chain, and that's it. I absolutely love how these turned out. It's so easy and so quick to make a huge batch of them at once. And this method isn't just for earrings. I started that same process on a second pair of earrings using some silver colored chain, but about halfway through making them, I decided I wanted it to be a bracelet and, just to see what it would look like. I loved this too, but I wish I had had at least one more of these resin rings to create balance. And I think my favorite thing about this method is just knowing all of the different ways you could customize the resin beads. This technique would look so cool with some dried moss or flowers or alcohol ink or even stickers. I kind of want to make some that look like a donut with like pink frosting and sprinkles. How cute would that be? Would you wear those? If you would, tell me about it in the comments. I hope you give this tutorial a try, and if you do, please share. Going into this next year, I'd love to see my community grow and celebrate each other's brilliant creativity. So if you want to be featured on the channel, send your designs to me on Facebook or Instagram. Now go make something awesome this year. I'll see you back in the studio next week, and as always, stay rad. If you'd like to see even more resin tutorials every week, be sure to subscribe and check out these videos.